Evelyn had worked in Jonathan Blake's estate for nearly 3 years. She was diligent and dedicated, never expecting to be called in for such an unusual conversation. Jonathan, a well-known but notoriously cold businessman, was facing a crisis in his company. That night, he needed to impress a group of influential investors at an important dinner. Without time or patience to find a suitable companion, he glanced at Evelyn, who was dusting the bookshelves in his office. His tone was as sharp as ever. I need you to come with me to a business dinner tonight. This isn't a request, it's an instruction. Stay quiet, be presentable, and don't offer any opinions." Evelyn was taken aback, but masked her surprise. His words felt more like an order than an invitation. However, she recognized this as an unexpected opportunity, one that could shift things in her favor. With a composed nod, she accepted, already sensing the tension and the unspoken potential of the night ahead. At the restaurant, Evelyn arrived on time in an elegant yet understated dress. Jonathan stood near the entrance, visibly impatient. He barely acknowledged her, muttering, "Let's go," as if she were nothing more than an accessory. As they entered the luxurious dining hall, eyes turned toward them. At a prominent table sat the investors, sharp-eyed men in tailored suits. Jonathan introduced Evelyn with little enthusiasm, barely even saying her name. "This is Evelyn. She's with me tonight," he stated dismissively, as if she were an afterthought. The investors exchanged polite but skeptical glances. Their expressions betrayed their thoughts. Evelyn clearly did not fit their expectations. Yet, she remained poised, taking in the silent judgment without reaction. Throughout dinner, Jonathan and the investors discussed profits, expansions, and strategic projections. Evelyn stayed quiet, listening intently and observing every detail. At one point, one of the investors, Mr. Lewis, a tall man with an air of authority, turned to her with a knowing smirk. "So, Evelyn, how does it feel to be part of a business dinner like this?" His tone was laced with condescension, expecting nothing more than a shy, polite response. She could have offered a meaningless answer, but instead, she chose to hold her ground. "It's fascinating to see these discussions up close," she said evenly. "Numbers and projections are important, but understanding the people behind them is just as crucial." The table went silent. Evelyn's expression remained calm, while Jonathan shot her a sharp glance, his irritation barely concealed. She had done exactly what he had forbidden, spoken up. Mr. Lewis, clearly surprised, let out a chuckle, but seemed intrigued. "An interesting perspective," he mused, while the other investors regarded her with newfound curiosity. Jonathan's expression hardened. He had expected Evelyn to be invisible, but instead, she was becoming the center of attention. The evening was quickly deviating from his carefully controlled plan. As the dinner continued, Evelyn remained composed, aware of Jonathan's growing discomfort. He avoided looking at her, his annoyance evident. But Mr. Lewis, on the other hand, seemed increasingly engaged, drawing her into the conversation. Perhaps because she was the only one defying the expectations of the room. When the discussion turned to corporate social responsibility, a topic that clearly did not align with Jonathan's priorities, Mr. Lewis posed a pointed question. "Does Mr. Blake's company contribute to any social initiatives?" His gaze was sharp, daring Jonathan to answer. Jonathan hesitated, clearly unprepared for the question. Before he could formulate a vague response, Evelyn stepped in, her voice steady and assured. "I believe companies should give back to the communities that support them," Evelyn said with quiet confidence. "Success isn't just about profit, it's also about responsibility. Taking that step would be meaningful." A heavy silence settled over the table. Every eye was now on her, but she didn't waver. To Evelyn, this wasn't just a passing remark, it was a matter of principle. Mr. Lewis, clearly impressed, leaned back with a knowing smile. "I couldn't agree more, Evelyn. You don't hear that perspective often in rooms like this," he said, throwing a glance at Jonathan, deliberately stirring the tension. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He had brought Evelyn here to be unnoticed, yet now she had become the center of attention. Irritated and feeling the evening slipping from his control, he decided to put her in her place. "Well," he said, forcing a smirk, "it's easy to talk about responsibility when you don't carry the weight of making tough decisions. Don't you think you might be speaking on something beyond your understanding? Evelyn?" Evelyn met his gaze without hesitation. She could hear the challenge in his words, but she wasn't about to back down. "Maybe I haven't made leadership decisions," she admitted, her voice unwavering, "but I understand their consequences. Sometimes, those further from power see things more clearly than those at the top." Her words cut through the tension like a blade. Mr. Lewis let out a small, amused chuckle, while the other investors exchanged intrigued glances. Evelyn had shifted the dynamic of the conversation in mere minutes. Jonathan, however, was not amused. He remained silent, clearly fuming as he watched his carefully planned evening unravel. The moment Evelyn had spoken, he had lost control of the situation, and to him, that was unforgivable. When the dinner finally ended, Jonathan didn't wait for Evelyn. Without a word, he strode ahead, leaving her behind. But Evelyn didn't need his approval. She knew she had made an impact. What mattered most was that her voice had been heard. Little did she know, Jonathan wasn't going to let this night go unanswered. Back at the mansion, his patience had worn thin. As soon as Evelyn stepped inside, he called her to his office, wasting no time on formalities. His expression was cold, his tone sharp. "What were you thinking, Evelyn?" he snapped. "I asked you to accompany me, to be discreet, not to take over the conversation." Evelyn, still calm from the night's events, met his anger with composure. She had expected this, but she didn't regret anything. "I only answered a question, Mr. Blake," she said steadily. "I simply shared my opinion." Jonathan scoffed. "Opinion?" He shot her a disdainful look. "You're a housekeeper, Evelyn. You weren't there to have an opinion. You were there to do as you were told, and you overstepped every boundary tonight." She took a slow breath, feeling the weight of his words. Jonathan didn't understand her, nor did he care to. To him, she was only ever going to be the help. Nothing more. "If my presence was such a problem, why did you bring me?" she asked, her voice firm. Jonathan's expression darkened. "Don't play that game with me. You were there because I paid you, and that included staying silent," he said coldly. Then, without hesitation, he delivered his final blow. "Consider this your last day here. You're fired." The words fell like a final verdict, but Evelyn didn't let the moment crush her. She remained composed, her expression unreadable. Instead of arguing, she simply nodded. Then, with quiet dignity, she turned away. She walked out of the office, knowing she would never have to endure Jonathan's dismissive gaze again. That night had given her clarity, not just about who Jonathan was, but about who she was. This was not an end. It was a beginning. The next morning, as she packed her belongings, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. It was Mr. Lewis. The investor who had been intrigued by her at dinner had a proposition for her, one she never expected. He wanted her on his team, offering her a role she had never imagined. With a mixture of surprise and determination, Evelyn accepted. Jonathan's dismissal had been meant as a punishment, but instead, it became the opportunity of a lifetime. In the months that followed, Evelyn thrived. Under Mr. Lewis's mentorship, she uncovered skills she had never been allowed to develop while working for Jonathan. Her insight and leadership quickly gained recognition, and she became a valued member of the company. For the first time, she was in a place where her voice was not just heard, but respected. Meanwhile, Jonathan's world was crumbling. His company's crisis deepened, fueled by his own short-sighted decisions. His relentless pursuit of profit, without regard for responsibility, had begun to backfire. And in his arrogance, he had let go of someone who had the kind of insight he desperately needed. But for Evelyn, The future had never looked brighter. Jonathan had made reckless decisions, losing key contracts and driving away trusted business partners. The situation worsened when the company where Evelyn now worked acquired a significant stake in his firm, putting her in a leadership role that directly impacted his business. Their paths crossed again at a high-profile executive meeting. When Jonathan entered the conference room and spotted Evelyn seated at the table among the decision-makers, his expression froze. A wave of disbelief crossed his face as he hesitated at the doorway, staring at her as if trying to comprehend how his former housekeeper had ended up here. Evelyn met his gaze, calm, composed, unwavering. There was no hint of bitterness, no sign of the resentment he might have expected. She had moved forward, and this moment was proof of that. The tension in the room was palpable. After the meeting, Jonathan wasted no time approaching her. His expression was rigid, filled with barely contained frustration. "Evelyn," he muttered, his voice low, as if saying her name in this setting felt unnatural. "So now you're sitting with them?" She held her ground. "Yes, I am. And as you may have noticed, our company has now acquired a major stake in yours." Jonathan scoffed, masking the uncertainty in his eyes. "This is absurd. Do you actually believe that holding a position here means you understand real leadership?" Evelyn remained composed. "Richard, during my time working for you, I learned exactly what leadership shouldn't be. I saw firsthand how arrogance blinds people and weakens their vision. It was a lesson I won't forget." Jonathan stepped closer, his voice sharp. "Don't think this changes anything between us," he sneered. "You're still just a lucky housekeeper who landed in the right place at the right time." Evelyn crossed her arms, looking him straight in the eye. "That's the difference between us, Jonathan. I don't need your respect to validate my success. I earned my place. It wasn't luck. It was effort. Meanwhile, you're watching your empire crumble because you never valued anyone but yourself." For the first time, Jonathan had no immediate retort. The weight of her words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent his life dismissing those he considered beneath him, but now, the very person he once overlooked had the power to challenge him. "I don't need anyone," he finally said, regaining his composure. "This company is mine, and I will prove that no one can take it from me." Evelyn's expression remained steady. "Then prove it," she said simply. "Show that you can still lead, that you can salvage what's left. But remember, those who think they're untouchable often fall the fastest." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Jonathan standing in silence, absorbing the truth of her words like a bitter pill. Jonathan felt isolated and humiliated, but for the first time, he was forced to see the truth. He was on a path that would only lead to further downfall. Evelyn was no longer just an unexpected opponent. She was the mirror he had avoided for years, reflecting his flaws with undeniable clarity. Her words lingered in his mind, a truth he wished he had never heard. After their confrontation, ignoring his mistakes became impossible. He had built his empire on arrogance, driving away talented employees, loyal partners, and even his own family. That night, instead of strategizing a desperate rescue plan, he found himself reflecting, truly reflecting, on every impulsive decision that had brought him to the brink of collapse. A few days later, both Jonathan and Evelyn were summoned to a crucial meeting with the investors. The air was thick with tension as the future of his company rested on this moment. Jonathan entered the conference room, his posture rigid, trying to mask his exhaustion with forced confidence. Across the table, Evelyn was already seated, reviewing documents with quiet focus. Once everyone settled, the head investor spoke bluntly. "Jonathan, the situation in your company is alarming. We need a drastic shift, and fast. To be clear, this is your last opportunity to prove to the board that you are capable of turning things around." A lump formed in Jonathan's throat, but he forced himself to remain composed. He launched into a speech about new strategies and financial projections, attempting to regain control of the conversation. But it quickly became clear. His plans were the same as before, centered only on immediate profits. The investors exchanged skeptical glances. They had heard all of this before. Then, Evelyn spoke up. "The focus of this company needs to shift," she said, her voice steady and confident. "Chasing profits alone isn't enough anymore. If we want to rebuild, we have to reconnect with the people, our customers, our employees, and the communities we serve. That means a real commitment to social responsibility and sustainable growth." A pause filled the room. The investors looked at her with renewed interest. The head of the group gestured for her to continue. Evelyn outlined a plan that integrated corporate, social projects, a strong company culture, and ethical leadership. An approach that not only repaired the company's image, but also secured its future. Jonathan sat beside her, feeling powerless. Every word she spoke resonated with confidence, and the investors were captivated. It was undeniable. She was saving the company he had nearly destroyed. By the end of the meeting, the investors seemed reassured, their trust shifting toward Evelyn's vision. As they left the room, Jonathan stopped in the hallway. Evelyn, noticing his hesitation, turned to face him. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Why are you helping me save this company?" Evelyn took a breath, her expression unreadable. "Because unlike you, I believe in the value of people, Jonathan. And more than that, I believe in what this company can become, with or without you." Her words hit him harder than he expected. For the first time, Jonathan felt something deeper than wounded pride. He felt a real desire to change, to be better. Evelyn watched him for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. Jonathan stood there, realizing that the woman he had once overlooked had now become his greatest example of leadership. But even as the weight of his mistakes settled in, another feeling burned beneath the surface. The urge to prove he still had something to offer. The unspoken tension between them grew. Evelyn, with her unwavering confidence, seemed to see right through him, anticipating his every move before he made it. And that only made Jonathan more determined. That week, the company prepared for a high-stakes meeting with the board of investors. The financial situation was still on fragile ground, and one wrong move could spell disaster. Jonathan knew this was his moment to show he could still lead, to prove, to Evelyn and to himself, that he wasn't finished yet. On the morning of the meeting, Evelyn arrived early, meticulously preparing the presentation. Meanwhile, Jonathan had his own plan, one that no one saw coming. Jonathan had a plan. He wanted to introduce a bold new initiative at the upcoming meeting, something that would make a statement, something that would prove he was still in control. In his mind, this was the key to regaining the board's trust and showing his commitment to the company's future. However, when the meeting began and Evelyn presented her strategy, one focused on steady growth without compromising stability, it became clear that the board was leaning in her direction. Still, Jonathan wasn't ready to back down. "I understand Evelyn's approach," he interjected at a critical moment in her presentation. "But I believe we need to take bolder steps. We need to show the market that we are entering a new era." Evelyn turned to him, her expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of disapproval in her eyes. She knew exactly what he was doing, pushing an aggressive approach to prove a point rather than focusing on what was best for the company. Keeping her voice measured, she replied, "Jonathan, you know that reckless decisions have already put us in this position before. Right now, our priority should be stabilizing the company, not rushing into expansion for the sake of appearances." The board members observed the exchange in silence, some nodding in agreement with Evelyn, while others seemed intrigued by Jonathan's counterpoint. But Jonathan, unwilling to lose ground, pressed on. "I understand your caution, Evelyn," he said, forcing a confident tone. "But without bold moves, we risk fading into mediocrity. If we don't take risks, we will slowly become irrelevant. This company needs visibility and fast results." Evelyn exhaled slowly, shaking her head. What the company needs, Jonathan, is consistency. The people we serve need a sustainable plan. We're past the point of making decisions based on ego-driven ambition. A thick tension filled the room. Some board members looked at Evelyn with respect, while others seemed to consider Jonathan's argument. The head of the board, Mr. Haynes, finally intervened. Enough. Both of you clearly have strong perspectives. I want you to collaborate and present a joint strategy at the next meeting. Evelyn gave a slight nod, her face calm. But Jonathan felt like he had lost. For the first time, he fully grasped that the company he had built was no longer under his control. The sense of powerlessness weighed heavily on him. That night, he stayed in his office, going through financial reports, trying to craft a plan that would outshine Evelyn's proposal. But no matter how many ideas he considered, none seemed viable without jeopardizing the company's recovery. Then, a message lit up his phone. An old business contact had reached out, a wealthy investor willing to inject a significant sum into the company. The only catch? The investor wanted influence over the company's social responsibility initiatives. To Jonathan, this felt like the perfect solution. He would secure the funding he desperately needed and at the same time prove to Evelyn that he too could make decisions for the greater good. Without consulting her or the board, he scheduled a meeting. The next day, Jonathan pitched his vision of aggressive expansion, and within hours, he had a deal. Signing the contract, he felt a surge of satisfaction. Finally, he had something concrete to present as proof of his leadership. But when Evelyn found out, her disappointment was immediate. She stormed into his office, where he was in the middle of a video call with the new investor, excitedly discussing growth strategies. The moment he saw her standing there, arms crossed, eyes burning with intensity, a chill ran down his spine. He already knew this wasn't going to end well. As soon as the call ended, Evelyn stepped forward. "You made a deal without consulting the board?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "How could you do this, Jonathan?" He took a deep breath, bracing for the argument. "Evelyn, this was an opportunity. We need this funding to expand. I'm trying to save the company, just like you." She shook her head, frustration evident in her expression. "Save the company? Don't you see how reckless this is? This investor now has a say in our social initiatives. What happens when he starts reshaping everything to serve his own interests?" Jonathan clenched his jaw, struggling to maintain control of the conversation. "It's a calculated risk," he said, his voice steady but defensive. "He doesn't have control." Evelyn cut him off. "Not yet, but you just handed him the power to influence decisions that should be made for the good of the company, not for profit." Her words struck a nerve. For the first time, Jonathan realized that despite his intentions, he might have made a mistake that couldn't be undone. "It's just a minor stake," Jonathan insisted. "Nothing more." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "And what happened to our commitment to valuing people? To leading with transparency? This isn't the kind of leadership we set out to build." Her words struck him like a blow. He suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. But more than that, he resented the way she always seemed to judge him. "Why do you always expect me to fail?" he asked, frustration seeping into his voice. "I'm trying, Evelyn. I want to do what's right." Evelyn exhaled, her expression softening just slightly, but her tone remained firm. "It's not about expecting you to fail, Jonathan," she said. "It's about making you understand the consequences of your actions. Leadership isn't just about making big, bold moves. It's about responsibility. And when you act in secret, all you're proving is that you still don't understand that." Jonathan looked away, her words weighing heavier than he wanted to admit. "Maybe I'll never see it the way you do," he muttered. She nodded, as if she had expected that answer. "Maybe, but until you do, you'll keep breaking the very promises you made. And believe me, that's a burden that only gets heavier." 2 weeks later, the board reconvened to discuss the deal Jonathan had made without their approval. The tension in the room was thick. The board members were deeply concerned about the implications of the contract. When the meeting began, Evelyn was the first to voice her concerns. "This deal represents a fundamental shift in our values," she stated, her voice steady. "We now have an outside investor influencing our social initiatives. I think we all understand the risk that presents." After hearing her argument, the chairman, Mr. Haynes, turned to Jonathan. "Jonathan, explain your reasoning." Jonathan swallowed, keeping his posture stiff. "I believe this investment will provide us with the financial strength needed to expand and ensure the long-term success of our projects." But before he could continue, Mr. Haynes cut him off, his gaze sharp. "This isn't just about money, Jonathan. We're dealing with a mission that goes beyond profit, and you acted recklessly." Jonathan felt the weight of their scrutiny. He glanced at Evelyn, whose expression was unreadable, yet he could feel her disappointment. In that moment, he knew he had lost more than just the board's trust. He had lost his final chance to prove he could change. By the end of the meeting, the board made a decisive move. They would be reassessing Jonathan's authority over future decisions. He walked out of the room in silence, a deep sense of defeat settling over him. For the first time, he realized that if he truly wanted to change, he had to let go of his ego. Evelyn hadn't just been challenging his decisions. She had been trying to show him a different way to lead. And for the first time, Jonathan began to see that the kind of leadership he had always relied on no longer had a place in this company. After the disastrous board meeting, he felt himself unraveling. The weight of failure followed him home. A home that had once symbolized success now felt empty and cold. For years, he had built a career, a reputation, an empire, and now all of it seemed to be slipping through his fingers. Jonathan knew the blame wasn't solely on the board or on Evelyn. The real problem was rooted in his own decisions. Everything he had tried to build alongside Evelyn was falling apart. Not because of external forces, but because of his own impulsiveness and refusal to change. He had been clinging to the same selfish habits, making rash decisions without thinking of the long-term consequences. And now, it was costing him everything: his company, the board's trust, and most importantly, Evelyn's respect. The next morning, Jonathan arrived at the office early. The weight of regret pressed down on him, but he knew he couldn't keep avoiding the truth. This wasn't about confronting Evelyn or trying to convince the board. He needed to confront himself. Sitting alone in his office, surrounded by reports and notes, he found himself analyzing his own choices more critically than ever before. He recalled Evelyn's words during the last meeting, how she had challenged his entire outlook, not just as a leader, but as a person. "You still see this company as nothing more than a machine for profit," she had told him. And now, for the first time, he truly understood the weight of that statement. What did leadership really mean? Had he ever actually understood it? Looking around his empty office, he realized something unsettling. Perhaps true leadership had never been a part of his life. Maybe he had just been playing a role all along, acting as the ruthless, calculating businessman who measured success purely in numbers. But now, standing at the edge of losing everything, he could see the flaw in that mindset. Leadership had to be more than just numbers on a balance sheet. For the first time, he saw the people behind those numbers, the employees, the partners, the communities that depended on the decisions he made. Later that afternoon, Evelyn appeared at his office door. Her expression was serious, but there was something different this time, an absence of the cold detachment she had carried before. Maybe, for the first time, she was seeing his vulnerability. Jonathan, exhausted from the endless battles, decided to speak with complete honesty. "Evelyn," he started, his voice uncertain, "I know I've made a lot of mistakes. I know my choices have hurt people in ways I can't undo. And I understand if you think there's no point in me even trying anymore." She watched him carefully, arms crossed, but there was a slight shift in her posture. an indication that she was at least willing to listen. "It's a start," she said, her tone softer than before. "But admitting mistakes isn't enough. What do you plan to do about it?" Jonathan inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the question. He had thought about it, but he didn't have a clear answer yet. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just know I can't keep going down the same path." Evelyn nodded slowly. "That's true. But real change isn't just an idea. It's something you have to practice every day. Leadership isn't about always being in control. It's about learning to listen. Are you willing to do that?" He swallowed hard, his pride fighting against his instinct to say yes. But he knew the truth. "I am," he said, "but I don't think I can do it alone." For the first time in a long time, Evelyn gave a small, knowing smile. "No one can, Jonathan. That's why real leadership isn't about standing alone. It's about trusting others. It's about building something bigger than yourself." Her words echoed in his mind. For years, he had believed that being in control meant handling everything on his own, that relying on others was a weakness. But now, faced with his own shortcomings, he realized the truth. Trust wasn't a weakness. It was the very thing he had been missing. After a long pause, Evelyn spoke again. "If you're serious about changing, there's a way forward, but it won't be easy. And it will require you to unlearn everything you think you know about leadership." Jonathan looked up at her, finally feeling something he hadn't in a long time: hope. "I'm ready," he said. "Tell me how I can help." That same week, Evelyn took Jonathan to visit a social initiative the company had invested in as part of its recovery efforts. The project focused on empowering women in vulnerable situations, helping them build the skills and confidence to enter the workforce. For Jonathan, who had spent his entire career in high-rise offices and luxury boardrooms, stepping into this environment felt uncomfortably real. At one of the meetings, he found himself sitting among women whose lives were worlds apart from his own. Single mothers struggling to provide for their children, survivors of abuse trying to rebuild, individuals fighting to break free from cycles of poverty. As he listened to their stories, something shifted within him. This wasn't about profit margins or quarterly reports. This was about people, about lives, about the real impact of every decision made at the top. For the first time, Jonathan understood. Leadership wasn't about control. It was about responsibility. And he was finally ready to embrace it. As Jonathan stood amidst the crowd, an older woman with silver hair and deep, knowing eyes approached him. "You're Jonathan Hale, aren't you?" she asked, her voice steady. "The man behind the company supporting this project?" Caught off guard, he hesitated before nodding. "Yes, that's me." The woman studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "My son worked for you a few years back," she said. "He gave years of his life to your company, only to be let go without a word. It broke him, you know. He lost his motivation, his sense of purpose." A heavy knot formed in Jonathan's chest. I'm sorry," he stammered. "I didn't know." She shook her head, her expression calm but firm. "Maybe you never cared to know. But seeing you here today, I wonder, maybe things are changing. I just hope that change is real." Her words hit him harder than he expected. For years, he had made decisions without thinking about the lives they affected. He had been exactly the kind of leader Evelyn had described, one who saw people as numbers rather than individuals with stories, struggles, and dreams. Back at the office, still shaken by the encounter, Jonathan sought out Evelyn. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for bringing me there. Today, I finally understood what you meant." Evelyn met his gaze, and for the first time, there was no coldness, only understanding. "This is just the beginning, Jonathan," she replied. "Change takes time and action, but maybe, over time, you'll realize that real leadership is about service, not control." That same week, Evelyn encouraged him to attend a meeting with the social project team. It was a crucial opportunity for him to listen, to truly hear the voices of those working on the ground. Walking into the meeting room, he felt the weight of the team's stares. Some eyes held skepticism, others curiosity. He knew he had a lot to prove and little time to regain their trust. Evelyn signaled for him to speak, but for once, he hesitated. Maybe, he thought, this was a moment to listen rather than talk. The meeting began with team members sharing their experiences and concerns about the project's progress. One of them, Mark, a passionate and dedicated young man, spoke about the struggles they faced. The biggest challenge, Mark explained, is the constant pressure to deliver quick results. But this isn't just another business deal. This is about people's lives. We need stability. We need commitment. Jonathan listened intently, absorbing every word. For the first time, he truly saw what Evelyn and the team had been fighting for. This wasn't about short-term gains or impressive numbers on a report. It was about building something lasting, something meaningful. And for the first time, he realized he wanted to understand, not just manage. After the meeting, Jonathan made a decision. He wasn't going to just oversee the project from the top. He was going to immerse himself in it, not as a leader, as a learner. He needed to see firsthand how the choices made in a boardroom affected lives in the real world. Evelyn accompanied him on visits to the communities benefiting from the project. On one of those visits, he met Julia, a young mother whose life had been transformed by the training program. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke about the opportunity she had been given. "This program gave me a chance," she said. "A real chance to support my daughter, to build a future." As Jonathan listened, something shifted inside him. For the first time in his life, he understood. This was what leadership was meant to be. Not power, not control, but impact. As Jonathan listened to Julia's story, a lump formed in his throat. For so long, he had seen business through numbers and reports, failing to realize the real lives impacted by his decisions. These weren't just figures on a spreadsheet. These were people with struggles, hopes, and dreams. Now, standing among them, he finally understood what Evelyn had been fighting for. The true measure of success wasn't in profit margins, but in the individual transformations of each person touched by the work they were doing. Back at the office, still processing everything, Jonathan found Evelyn. This time his voice was steady, his words filled with a newfound determination. "You were right," he admitted. "I always saw this as just another tool for expansion, a way to rebuild my reputation and climb back to the top. But today, I realized how wrong I was." Evelyn studied him, weighing his words carefully. "So what do you plan to do now?" He took a deep breath, choosing his response carefully. "I want to learn," he said. "I want to do this the right way. To serve. To truly see the impact of what we're building. I want every person involved in these projects to find something I never had. Real leadership." For the first time, Evelyn saw something different in his eyes. Genuine sincerity. "Then start proving it," she said simply. "With every decision, every conversation, show us that change isn't just a promise, but something real." In the weeks that followed, Jonathan threw himself into the work, immersing himself in every aspect of the projects. He was no longer just a businessman overseeing a venture. He was learning from the people on the ground, following each initiative closely, understanding its challenges and victories. Slowly, his role began to shift. He wasn't the boss giving orders anymore. He became someone who listened, who sought to understand, who wanted to serve rather than control. At first, the board remained skeptical, but they started to notice the subtle changes. He was more open to feedback, less impulsive in his decisions. Evelyn, too, saw his progress. She remained cautious, knowing that true change wasn't immediate, but rather a continuous process. She wanted him to understand that leadership wasn't just about moments. It was about commitment over time. By the end of the month, Jonathan felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. For the first time, he didn't see the project as a stepping stone for personal gain, but as a mission that touched countless lives. One afternoon, as Evelyn passed by his office, he stood and stopped her. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere, "for not giving up on me, even when I refused to see it." Evelyn gave him a small smile. "Leadership is a long journey, Jonathan. But if you truly commit to it, you'll come to understand its real value." Her words stayed with him. For the first time, he felt ready, not just to lead, but to grow. Jonathan dedicated himself to the project with an intensity that surprised everyone around him. In the weeks following the company's crisis, he committed to learning every detail, not just about finances, but about the communities they served. He attended weekly visits, engaged with the team, and understood the weight of each decision. No longer was the project just an investment. It had become his mission. For Jonathan, this was more than about winning back the board's trust. It was about rebuilding something far more important, his own sense of purpose. And Evelyn, watching from a distance, was the first to see just how much he had changed. In the months that followed, Evelyn observed Jonathan from a distance, curious to see if this transformation would last. At first, she had doubts, but over time, his continued presence at the project, his thoughtful questions, and his genuine effort to listen and understand proved that his commitment was real. As his determination became evident, so did the board's renewed respect for him. What had initially been routine appearances at project meetings soon became a central part of his schedule. Jonathan began learning people's names, understanding their stories, and tracking their progress. It was a world completely different from the high-stakes business meetings and elite networking events that had once consumed his time. During one of his visits, he had a long conversation with Anna, a middle-aged woman who had lost her job but found a fresh start through the project. She spoke with a sincerity that deeply moved him, sharing the struggles she had endured and how the initiative had restored her dignity. "This isn't just a job for me, Mr. Hale," Anna said, emotion filling her voice. "It's a second chance. For the first time, I feel like someone believes in my potential." Jonathan felt his throat tighten. This wasn't just about providing opportunities. This was about rebuilding lives. Every story he heard reinforced the truth Evelyn had been trying to show him all along. His commitment grew stronger. He wanted to be worthy of the trust these people placed in the project. And more than anything, he wanted to prove, through action, that he truly cared. The project was no longer just a strategy on paper. It had become something real, something meaningful. As the results of the initiative became more visible, so did the company's reputation. The board, once skeptical of Jonathan's ability to lead responsibly, began to recognize his efforts. At board meetings, Jonathan presented progress updates with a humility that was new to him. Gone was the overconfident businessman who once sought recognition for personal gain. Instead, he shifted the focus to the team's work, highlighting Evelyn's contributions as crucial to the success of the initiative. The data spoke for itself. The project was making a tangible difference, and the board members didn't hide their satisfaction. During one meeting, Mr. Haynes, the chairman of the board, addressed Jonathan directly. "I have to admit, Jonathan," he said, "you're handling this project with a level of commitment that many of us didn't expect. This pilot initiative is proving to be a success, and I believe we can expand it further." Jonathan gave a quiet, appreciative smile, feeling the weight of those words. He knew that Evelyn had been an invaluable mentor in this journey, and in every meeting, he made sure to acknowledge her role. But something had begun to shift. What had once been just professional admiration was turning into something more. The more time Jonathan spent working alongside Evelyn, the more he began to see her differently. She wasn't just an intelligent and capable leader. She was a force of nature, a woman with an unwavering sense of purpose. Someone who didn't just manage the project, but became an essential part of it. He saw it in the way she spoke with the people they helped, in the attention she gave to every detail, in the respect she earned effortlessly. Evelyn had a quiet strength that inspired those around her. During a visit to one of the project sites, Jonathan and Evelyn attended a small gathering organized by the beneficiaries, a simple celebration to thank the team for their support. Jonathan watched as Evelyn moved through the crowd, interacting with people with a warmth and sincerity that deeply touched him. She belonged here, and the people knew it. Watching her, Jonathan felt something stir inside him. As the evening wound down, Jonathan offered to walk Evelyn back to the office. The streets were quiet, and for the first time, he felt the urge to understand her beyond the work they did together. "Evelyn," he said, his voice softer than usual, "I've always admired your dedication to this project. But what led you to be so deeply involved?" She smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up her face. "Jonathan, I've always believed in doing something bigger than myself," she said. "I grew up seeing people around me struggle, people who just needed a chance. That left a mark on me, working on something that helps others rebuild their lives. It's the most meaningful thing I could ever do." Her words struck him in a way he hadn't expected. For so long, he had viewed the project as a way to rebuild his reputation, a way to prove himself. But for Evelyn, this was never about personal gain. It was about something deeper. And in that moment, Jonathan finally understood what truly drove the extraordinary woman walking beside him. In the weeks that followed, Jonathan and Evelyn's collaboration grew stronger. What had once been a professional partnership built on tension and caution transformed into something else, something built on trust and mutual respect. They strategized together, shared ideas, and supported each other through every challenge. But as they spent more time working side by side, Jonathan couldn't ignore the realization forming in his heart. Something had changed, and it wasn't just about leadership anymore. Jonathan didn't just admire Evelyn, he was beginning to fall in love with her. The realization caught him off guard. He had always been reserved, even skeptical about mixing personal relationships with work. Yet now, he found himself constantly thinking about Evelyn, looking for excuses to be near her, finding joy in the way she smiled. She wasn't just a colleague, she was someone who challenged him, inspired him, and made him want to be better. One evening, after a long meeting, they remained in the office, discussing the future of the project. What had started as a professional conversation slowly drifted into something more personal. Jonathan took the opportunity to express his gratitude. "Evelyn, I owe you so much," he said sincerely. "Everything I've learned these past few months, I wouldn't have gotten here without you. Before, I thought success was about control and expansion. But you taught me that the real value is in building something meaningful." Evelyn looked at him, surprised by his words. "I'm glad to know this meant something to you, Jonathan. Seeing this change in you has been one of the most rewarding things I've experienced." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, there was a quiet tension between them, something unspoken, yet undeniably present. Jonathan felt the urge to move closer, but he hesitated. He didn't want to cross a boundary that could risk their professional relationship, but at the same time, he knew what he felt for Evelyn was real. As the days passed, Jonathan found himself drawn to Evelyn more and more. He noticed the small things, the way she lit up when speaking about something that moved her, how effortlessly she inspired those around her, the unwavering conviction in her voice when defending the project's purpose. Evelyn wasn't just someone he admired. She was someone he deeply respected, someone who brought meaning to his life in a way no one ever had before. One night, after working late in the office, he let something slip. "You know," he said absent-mindedly, "you're one of the most incredible people I've ever met." Evelyn laughed softly, a bit surprised by his sincerity. "Thank you, Jonathan," she said. "But I think you've changed a lot too. And honestly, I admire the person you're becoming." Her words struck something deep within him. That was the moment he realized. This wasn't just fleeting admiration or attraction. This was real. He wasn't just in love with Evelyn. He wanted to build something with her. Not just in their work, but in life. As the days went on, their connection deepened. Their professional partnership evolved into something more. Something neither of them had expected, yet both of them felt. Jonathan, once driven by ego and ambition, now found himself opening up to Evelyn in ways he never had with anyone before. With her, he felt lighter, more alive, more complete. And Evelyn felt the same. She had watched Jonathan transform, not just as a businessman, but as a person. His change wasn't just an act, it was genuine, and that drew her in more than she ever expected. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan found ways to spend more time with her. He invited her to lunch after meetings, suggested evening walks after long workdays, and started conversations that drifted beyond work, conversations about life, fears, and dreams. Slowly, the line between professional and personal blurred, and their connection grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, after an intense day working on the project, they remained in the office, reviewing reports late into the night. The dim lighting, the quiet stillness of the space, it created an intimacy neither of them could ignore. They sat close, their arms almost touching. Jonathan could feel the warmth of her presence beside him, and an overwhelming sense of tenderness washed over him. "I wanted to thank you," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "For everything, for pushing me to be better, for believing in me, even when I didn't deserve it." Evelyn turned to him, her expression soft, yet filled with depth. "You don't need to thank me, Jonathan," she said gently. "The change came from you. I just helped you see the path." He smiled, but there was more he needed to say, something that had been weighing on him for weeks. His heart pounded. He had spent so much of his life running from emotions like this. But now, he knew he couldn't hide from it any longer. Taking a deep breath, he spoke. "Evelyn," he said, his voice hesitant but firm. I can't keep pretending. The truth is, I'm in love with you." The words hung between them. Evelyn's eyes widened slightly, her breath hitching. Jonathan's heart pounded as he waited for her response. At that moment, everything had changed. Jonathan felt his heartbeat quicken, afraid that revealing his feelings had been a mistake. But instead of pulling away, Evelyn smiled softly, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "I love you too, Jonathan," she confessed, her voice filled with sincerity. His breath caught as she continued. "I've felt this way for a while, but I was afraid of how it might change everything we've built together." Jonathan let out a relieved laugh, one filled with emotion. "I felt the same way," he admitted. "But I can't keep pretending these feelings don't exist. I don't want to just be your partner at work. I want to be with you in every way." Evelyn nodded, her smile growing. "I want that too. I think we're finally ready for something more." Still sitting side by side, they instinctively leaned in. Jonathan felt his heart race as Evelyn's lips met his in a gentle yet deep kiss. In that moment, all barriers fell. It was pure connection, one built on trust, admiration, and love. As they pulled away, he wrapped his arms around her in a warm embrace, sealing their decision to move forward together. From that day on, their relationship naturally blossomed. They began spending more time together outside of work, exploring the city, sharing dinners, enjoying moments that had nothing to do with business. Every conversation brought them closer, revealing how perfectly they complemented each other. At work, they remained professional, ensuring their relationship didn't interfere with their responsibilities. But the people around them noticed, the way their eyes lit up when they spoke, the unspoken understanding between them. Though they had fallen in love, their dedication to the project remained their top priority. But it was also clear that their love fueled their passion for their work, making them even stronger together. As months passed, the project thrived beyond expectations. The community flourished, with participants finding new job opportunities and rediscovering hope for the future. With the success of the initiative, plans to expand into other regions began to take shape, and the company gained national recognition for its ethical and sustainable impact. The board, once skeptical of Jonathan's leadership, now fully supported his vision. In a board meeting, Mr. Haynes, who had always been one of his toughest critics, addressed him directly. "Jonathan, you've proven that change is possible," he said. "This project is a success, and much of that is because of your commitment and vision. I'm proud to say you are a true leader now." Jonathan nodded, humbled by the words. He glanced at Evelyn sitting beside him and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He knew without her, none of this would have been possible. Outside of work, their love continued to deepen. Jonathan had never felt this way before. He had spent so much of his life chasing success, but now he realized that real fulfillment came from sharing it with someone who truly mattered. One sunny afternoon, as they walked through a quiet park, he gently took Evelyn's hand and stopped. Looking into her eyes, he spoke from the heart. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," he admitted, emotion thick in his voice. "You've changed my life, Evelyn, and I want to spend the rest of it making you happy." Evelyn's eyes filled with joyful tears. "I want that too, Jonathan," she whispered. "You're not the same man I met at the start. You've become someone even greater, and I love you for who you are." Jonathan smiled, his heart full, and kissed her softly beneath the golden afternoon sky. As time went on, their journey continued, both in love and in leadership. The company became a shining example of ethical business and social responsibility, setting a new standard for how businesses could drive positive change. Together, Jonathan and Evelyn took on co-leadership roles, ensuring the impact of their work reached even more communities. They weren't just known as successful leaders, but as an inspiring couple, proof that love, integrity, and dedication could truly transform lives. The company received awards, media recognition, and national praise. But for Jonathan and Evelyn, the greatest reward wasn't in accolades. It was in seeing lives changed, families restored, and futures rebuilt, because of what they had started together. Months later, in a small, intimate ceremony, Jonathan and Evelyn exchanged vows. Surrounded by friends, colleagues, and community members whose lives they had helped transform, they promised not only their love to each other, but also their commitment to a greater purpose. Their vows weren't just words of romance. They were promises to continue working side by side, leading with their hearts, and leaving behind a legacy far greater than themselves. That night, as they danced under the stars, Jonathan reflected on how much his life had changed. The man who once sought success at all costs now understood. True success came from building something with meaning, with purpose, with the woman he loved. And so, together, they began a new chapter. Not just as partners in business, but as partners in life. A love story built on transformation, trust, and the belief that together they could change the world. Do you think Evelyn made the right choice in forgiving Jonathan? Share your thoughts in the comments. On a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories.